In this video, we are going to be solving triangles that are not right triangles. So if you don't have a hypotenuse, you don't have an opposite side, you don't have an adjacent side, how do you go about solving a triangle that's not a right triangle? Well, there's two different ways. One of them is law of sines, another one is law of cosines. We're going to be focusing on law of sines on this one. Part of the challenge here is, how do you know when you should use law of sines? How do you know when you should use law of cosines? So I'm going to kind of explain where I assume that I'm going to test to see if I can use law of sines. And if I can't use law of sines, then I have to use law of cosines. Let me show you what I mean by that. Let's go through solving a problem. So basically, there's two different ways to look at this. There's this formula. They have a couple equal signs, and there's a reason for that. But basically, let me take these fractions and flip them and show them another look to it. That if you have sine of A over A, that is your angle and your side across from each other, right? So you're going to take sine of A divided by A, and that's going to equal sine of B divided by the sine across, or the side across from it. So let me stop with that. Basically, what you're doing with law of sines is you're creating a proportion. And so to solve a proportion, you're going to cross multiply. But how much information do you have to have in order to solve this proportion? So if you look at the idea of a proportion, and you have something like this, 2/3 equals, I don't know, maybe something like that. The key is that if you have one full fraction, then you're going to be able to use law of sines. Okay, so if you have an angle and a side across from each other, you're going to be able to use law of sines. So your key on all of these things is one full fraction. All right, and then we add the extra piece in here just because it depends on the setup, depends on the information. You might set up those values, and here's your proportion. You might set up those values, and here's your proportion, or you might have kind of some of the pieces in between. So how do you know when you can use law of sines? Basically, you can, if you can answer this question of, do you have a full fraction? All right, if you can answer yes to that, then you can use law of sines. So what you need is a side and opposite angle. All right, and then once you have that, once you know that you have that, you're basically going to solve a proportion. How do you solve a proportion? You're going to end up cross multiplying. All right, so let's do one. Let's kind of show you what we mean by all this. So the first thing is they give us some information. Let's draw a picture and let's see if we have one full fraction. And when I draw this, I don't go crazy about trying to draw this to scale. I just need my pieces of information in the right spots. So I have angle A is 50 degrees. I have angle B is 75 degrees. And then I have side B, which is across from angle B, is 12. And that right there is telling me that I can use law of sines. We have one full fraction. Okay. First thing that I'm going to do before I even do that is I know 2 out of the 3 sides, or 2 out of the 3 angles. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out what that angle is right there. And we're going to figure out angle C by taking 180 degrees. And we're going to subtract out the 75 and the 50. And what we'll have left is angle C. So if we throw that into a calculator, we'll take 180 minus 75 minus 50, and that turns out to be 55 degrees. Okay, so that's one piece of information. So let me label that, do a different color. 5 degrees. Okay, so the blue represents the pieces that we found, and then the pencil represents the initial given information. So from here, I'm going to start by setting up our fraction. Sine of 75 over the side across from it is 12. And that's going to be proportional to whatever other piece of information. So if this is angle A, this is going to be side A. So we could set up the other side as sine of 50 over side A. Now, how do you solve a proportion? We cross multiply. So we cross multiply, and so we're going to have A times sine of 75 equals 12 times sine of 50. And then if we're going to try to get A by itself, we're going to divide both sides by sine of 75. Divide by sine of 75. So they cancel and undo each other. And then A is just going to equal whatever that is. So on the calculator, I'm going to throw that in. Make sure that your mode, that your calculator is in degrees before you go too far. So we're going to do 12 times sine of 50 divided by sine of 75. Make sure you close that parenthesis, so then that way it's just sine of 50, it's some decimal. And there we go, so 9.5. So A is 9.5. So I'm also going to throw that on my picture for my kind of quick check at the end. We know that that's 9.5. All right, and then piece that we're missing, it's not a right triangle, so I can't do Pythagorean theorem or anything like that. I just have to set up another law of sines. So we'll start with, again, what we already know. I try to avoid using values that I found. Sometimes I can do that, sometimes I can't. But so I can still go back to this, sine of 75 over 12. Now I can set it up as this one, sine of 55 over little c. All right, and then we do the exact same cross multiply. C times sine of 75 is going to equal 12 times sine of 55. And then I want to undo this multiplication to get c by itself. So we divide by sine of 75, divide by sine of 75. So c is going to equal whatever that turns out to be. So 12 times sine of 55, close parenthesis, divided by sine of 75, close parenthesis, 10.2. 10.2. All right, so those were the missing pieces, and I'm going to put them on the picture. Just so I can do one last quick spot check and make sure that our largest side and largest angle are across from each other. Your shortest side and your shortest side and your smallest angle are across from each other, and then the middle ones are across from each other. As long as all that lines up, there's a good chance that we did all the math correctly. All right, so that was an introduction to law of sines and going through one problem. So again, the key is, do you have one full fraction? And if you do, you can use law of sines.